There are moments when the veil of ordinary life seems to shimmer, as though the mundane itself contains whispers of something grander, an unseen architecture beneath time, thought, and form. One might be reading an unassuming report, skimming government files out of curiosity or conspiracy, and stumble upon a document not meant to be remembered. A classified relic, perhaps misplaced or leaked, that speaks in strangely lucid tones about consciousness, intention, and the curvature of time. This is not fiction. This is not fantasy. It is the chilling and exhilarating edge of reality as described, however cryptically, in what some call the CIA's forbidden document on time travel. A map, of sorts, not of geography but of perception, not of destinations but of inner leverage. Time travel, as typically imagined in our cultural psyche, has always belonged to the domain of blinking machines and chrome dials, DeLoreans and wormholes, paradoxes and sci-fi stylings. But what if that was only the metaphor? What if the real engine of temporal movement has always lived within us, in the quiet geometries of consciousness, in the way thought itself coils and stretches across the unfolding now? The document in question, whether truly forbidden or simply ignored, does not speak of gadgets or future cities. It points instead toward the manipulation of thought as the manipulation of time. Toward the strange notion that by changing how we observe, we change what is observed. That reality, far from a fixed and dead thing, is reactive, pliable, something like a dream shared by minds asleep to their own authorship. What stands at the center of this alleged document is not so much a technical manual as it is a metaphysical upheaval. It dares to suggest that the nature of time is not linear but holographic. That consciousness is not a byproduct of the brain but a field that perceives, connects, and bends experience into narrative. That reality may be more illusion than substance, an illusion that can be shaped, like clay, through the furnace of disciplined awareness. The document, when read with open eyes, becomes something eerily akin to scripture. Not religious scripture, perhaps, but the kind whispered by mystics and quantum physicists alike, those fringe interpreters of the sacred mechanics of existence. The mind recoils, at first, from such suggestions. Conditioned by schooling and science to imagine reality as stable and time as forward-bound, we struggle to picture how time travel might occur without movement. But that is the genius and the madness of the thing. It reframes time travel not as locomotion but as awareness, replacing motion with comprehension, distance with alignment. It speaks in tones familiar to ancient wisdom, and yet it comes cloaked in the clinical armor of a government study. The contradiction itself is part of the magic. Here is bureaucracy brushing against transcendence, black ink attempting to chart the formless. Whether this document was meant to be buried, or simply never understood, is unclear. What is clear is that it offers more than dry speculation. It dares us to see ourselves as architects of the present moment, able to influence what unfolds by altering the frequency of our thought. It touches on the gateway experience, on hemispheric synchronization, on the intersection of altered states and physical law. It alludes to Monroe Institute techniques and hints at a human capacity so vast it feels alien. It is a confluence of mysticism and militarism, a coded invitation disguised as an analysis. But more than its contents, it is the implications that haunt. If the shape of our reality is malleable, if time responds not to mass or velocity alone, but to intention, then what else are we missing? What else lies dormant in the quiet corners of our awareness? Could the collective dream of humanity be edited, rescripted, awakened? The idea is not new. Hermetic traditions spoke of the world as mind. Vedic seers described time as cyclical and illusionary. Tibetan monks traversed inner dimensions in search of wisdom beyond chronology. But to hear echoes of such visions emerging from government halls, from an institution built on control and secrecy, is both unsettling and oddly confirming. As if something long known had been caught, even briefly, in the net of analysis, and then hidden again before it could reshape too much. What we are opening here is not just a study or a scandal. It is a doorway. Not a literal gate of gleaming technology, but a conceptual threshold, an invitation to entertain a different premise about reality itself. That premise is radical, that you, the observer, are not separate from the observed. That your consciousness is not writing time, but co-authoring it. That you can, through disciplined tuning, learn to walk the lattice of probabilities and step sideways into alternative versions of now. The CIA's document, in its strange blend of quantum theory, meditation practice, and intelligence jargon, becomes a palimpsest. Underneath the surface of official language lies something older and far more personal, a call to remember. To remember that time is not a chain but a sea, and that the self is not a passenger but a navigator, one whose compass has been hidden, not lost. In approaching this exploration, we will not reduce the material to simplistic formulas. Instead, we will journey through its landscapes like wanderers in a forgotten temple, deciphering symbols, listening for echoes, watching for the faint glow of meaning behind meaning. We will let the metaphors grow vines around our thoughts, and we will not rush the unraveling. The truth, if it lives here at all, does not shout. It murmurs. And so, as we begin to step into this forgotten corridor of consciousness and control, this strange artifact that blends science and spirit, you must ask yourself not whether it is true in the traditional sense, but whether it feels like remembering. Whether it stirs a sense that you have seen this structure before, in dreams, in déjà vu, in moments when time seemed to ripple around you. We stand not at the edge of science fiction, but at the edge of self-recognition. There is a peculiar quiet that falls when one steps beyond the known, an almost sacred silence, like the breath the universe holds before unveiling its next page. To walk into the core themes of the so-called CIA document on time travel is not to read instructions but to trace an invisible topology of the real. It is to begin a descent into thought itself, into that space where science converges with mysticism, and where reality starts to shimmer with the weight of its own malleability. At the heart of this document lies a proposition so simple and so vast it escapes immediate grasp: reality is not objective. It is participatory. It responds. It conforms, shifts, bends not only under the laws of physics but under the influence of consciousness, especially focused, coherent, harmonized consciousness. That is the axis around which this entire exploration spins, the power of directed awareness to shape experience, to navigate probabilities, to step out of linear causality and into a kind of temporal authorship. To explain this, the document draws upon a range of sources: quantum mechanics, neuropsychology, holography, and meditation practices, all converging on a singular point of resonance: the gateway experience. This process, developed and researched in part by the Monroe Institute and analyzed by U.S. intelligence, involves techniques that synchronize the hemispheres of the brain, allowing the user to enter deeply coherent states of consciousness. In such states, according to the document, the mind is able to transcend the illusion of separateness. It can access information beyond time-bound senses. It can, perhaps, travel. But what does travel mean here, in this strange inner architecture? Not movement through space in a classical sense, but realignment of attention. The self becomes a receiver, a frequency-specific participant in the hologram of reality. The analogy often used is that of a hologram: each part contains the whole. In this view, every moment contains all moments, every point in space contains the pattern of all space. Thus, to shift your consciousness, to attune your awareness through practice, is to shift your place within the holographic field. You are not teleporting. You are retuning. This concept reframes time from the river we travel through to the river we are made of. The document speaks of consciousness as energy, and energy as vibration, frequency, waveform. And so, by adjusting the frequencies of one's consciousness, through binaural beats, breathwork, intense focus, or deep meditation, one can, in effect, align with a different layer of the field. A different timeline. A different probability track. This begins to echo ancient knowledge, but filtered through a contemporary vocabulary. Instead of chakras, we hear of resonance patterns. Instead of astral projection, we read of phase coherence. Yet the underlying truth glows through, that the boundary between the inner world and the outer world is not a boundary at all. It is a seam, ready to be unstitched. And stitched into the document's pages is another profound theme, one that whispers of existential alchemy, the collapse of duality. In ordinary waking life, we move in binaries: subject and object, self and world, cause and effect. But in altered states, and in the language of this document, those distinctions begin to melt. The mind and the world mirror each other. The internal shift becomes the external change. The observer and the observed entwine. This is not just poetic mysticism, it is a claim, a statement of functional mechanism. You shift your energy, and the world responds not as a metaphor, but as a system of correspondence. Reality, then, becomes a living feedback loop. Your beliefs filter your perception molds your emotional state reinforces your beliefs, and beneath it all, your state of consciousness determines which part of the hologram you inhabit. The document doesn't just imply this. It builds a scaffolding around it, hinting that reality is a structure of nested frequencies and that we are not merely walking through it, we are tuning it like a string instrument. Another theme pulses beneath the technical language, the suppression of this knowledge. Why would such a document be marked, stored, and then ignored? Why would the potential of human consciousness to influence time be treated with silence? Perhaps because it undermines control. If each individual can manipulate their slice of the universe, not in fantasy, but in perceptual truth, then the entire edifice of external authority trembles. The metaphysical becomes political. The personal becomes revolutionary. We begin to sense that time travel, as described here, is not a toy of science fiction, but a return to sovereignty. A reclamation of authorship over the inner lens that shapes all things. It is not instant nor easy. It is not sold in circuits in chrome. It is practiced in silence, cultivated through attention, refined in states of stillness so deep they dissolve the crust of consensus reality. One more concept rises like a mist through the pages: entropy. In the document, entropy is presented as a directional bias, a way to understand why time feels linear, even when it may not be. The entropy of the physical world creates the illusion of irreversible flow. But consciousness, in its coherence, can step outside of entropy's grip. In this way, focused awareness becomes a temporal anchor, holding space while the world flows around it. This is the mechanism by which manipulation becomes possible, not because the laws of physics are violated, but because they are transcended at the level of perception. And perception, as we now see, is everything. As we stand in the presence of these themes, it is not hard to feel overwhelmed. But overwhelm is often the precursor to awakening. These are not merely ideas. They are invitations. Not just theories, but tools. They ask us not to believe, but to remember. Not to agree, but to practice. Because the truth, if this document is to be believed, is not something that can be given. It must be tuned into. It must be resonated with. We are not just readers of this strange cosmic script. We are characters and authors both. The paper may have come from a vault, but the knowledge it carries has always been waiting within us. Waiting for the right frequency. Waiting for the right question. To grasp something as vast and elusive as the manipulation of time through consciousness, we often need more than language, we need myth, metaphor, and symbol. In many ways, the concepts embedded within the CIA's so-called forbidden documents speak most fluently in allegory, not in analysis. The language of metaphor is the original language of the psyche, the hidden vocabulary of the soul. And so, to journey deeper into these truths, we must shift from rational dissection into symbolic immersion, stepping not just into meaning but into story. Imagine, then, a desert with no end, a boundless expanse of golden sand under a black sky. In the middle of this desert stands a solitary tower, narrow and silver, humming with a frequency that cannot be heard, only felt. The people who dwell in the desert believe time to be a wind, blowing always from one direction, never ceasing. They walk with their backs to the past, their faces turned to what they think is the future, never questioning the path beneath their feet. But one day, a child wanders into the base of the tower, where the sand does not touch, and the wind does not blow. There she finds a mirror, not a reflection of her face, but of her being. As she stares, something strange happens, the wind outside stops. The sand freezes midair. Time, for a moment, is no longer flowing. It is listening. The mirror is not made of glass. It is made of attention. And it reflects not what is, but what could be. She sees her past rewritten, her future unwritten, all coiled within her gaze. And as she steps out of the tower, the desert is no longer endless. It is malleable. This child is the symbol of awakened consciousness, the tower is the coherent mind, and the mirror is intention. In this story, time is not a force but a performance, a wind created by collective movement. And it stops not because it is broken, but because someone dared to look without assumption. This is the essence of what the document implies, that time responds to deep attention. That the desert is a dream sustained by agreement. And that mirrors, if held properly, do not reflect, they generate. Another image comes to us, this time from a forest older than memory. Here, hidden in the roots of an ancient tree, lies a spiral staircase leading downward. The deeper one descends, the stranger things become. The walls begin to shimmer, scenes from lives not lived ripple like light on water, voices echo that are not echoes at all. The traveler eventually realizes she is walking not into a place, but into a possibility. Each step down is a step inward, and each layer she passes is a layer of perception peeled back. At the bottom of the staircase is not an ending, but a blank space, a void waiting to be scripted. In this allegory, the spiral staircase is symbolic of the layered structure of consciousness as described in the document. Our ordinary waking mind resides on the top floor, navigating a narrow corridor of linear time. But deeper levels of awareness open into larger halls of possibility, where time is not a path but a sphere, a field, a web. The descent is not into darkness but into dimensionality. And the void at the base is the source, not empty, but ready. Consider yet another tale, woven from the myths of many, a city suspended between dimensions, visible only in dreams. Its buildings are fluid, shifting with the thoughts of its inhabitants. There is no government, no fixed law, only resonance. Those who vibrate in harmony rise to its higher towers, where time dilates and distances collapse. Those who fall out of sync slip back into the waking world, forgetting the city ever existed. Entry is not earned by action, but by alignment. Only those who remember how to tune may stay. This city is a metaphor for the holographic nature of reality, and for the hidden layers of human experience that the document hints at. The dreaming city exists not elsewhere but underneath, beneath the crust of consensus reality. Access is not a matter of travel but of transformation. You do not find the city. You become someone who can see it. You do not control time. You step into the self that lives beyond it. Even religious narratives, stripped of dogma, pulse with similar symbolic currents. The burning bush of Moses becomes a symbol of coherent energy, flame without consumption, perception beyond physics. Christ walking on water reflects the mind stepping above the storm of entropy. Buddha touching the earth beneath the Bodhi tree becomes a metaphor for grounding awareness in the holographic field, declaring alignment with all existence. These are not miracles as disruptions of law, they are demonstrations of laws not yet understood. Through these symbols, the document's cold, bureaucratic prose begins to warm into something timeless. It speaks, indirectly, of ancient archetypes, the shaman navigating altered states, the initiate passing through gates of initiation, the magician transforming inner vibration into outer manifestation. These archetypes are not fantasy. They are the mythologized language of quantum consciousness. What the mystic sees in vision, the physicist confirms in equation. And somewhere between those poles stands the reader, us, invited into the in-between. But perhaps the most profound symbol of all is the labyrinth. We are led to believe reality is a straight path. Yet what if it is a maze, a spiraling fractal of choices and branches, each one leading not forward, but inward? The labyrinth does not confuse us. It teaches us how to walk with awareness. It trains us to recognize patterns. In time, the seeker begins to understand that there is no minotaur at the center, only a mirror, and beyond that, a door. That door is what the document guards. Not literally. Not bureaucratically. But symbolically. It points toward the possibility that we are not trapped in time but tangled in perception. That the key to the labyrinth is not found in motion, but in stillness. In awareness sharpened until it cuts through the illusion of sequence, through the story we've mistaken for truth. And this is why the document matters, not because it reveals some ultimate technological secret, but because it echoes an ancient knowing dressed in the clothes of government analysis. Its greatest contribution may not be information, but validation. It tells us that those long-considered mystics, dreamers, and wanderers were not wrong. They were simply using the right tools in the wrong age. So we return from the desert, descend from the tower, leave the dreaming city, and find ourselves back in the ordinary world, but changed. Because once you understand the symbols, you begin to see them everywhere. In traffic lights and bedtime routines, in patterns of behavior and flickers of déjà vu, reality becomes legible. And the self? The self becomes responsible. The moment we descend from the heights of symbolic narrative into the flat plains of everyday life, a question inevitably arises: so what? What good is this secret knowledge, this forbidden transmission of time travel and reality manipulation, if it cannot lift us in our daily moments? What use is the idea of frequency-shifting consciousness if it cannot steady us when bills come due, when relationships fracture, when the body grows old and time seems utterly unbendable? But herein lies the most delicate secret of all: the transformation does not occur in the celestial, but in the ordinary. It is not in the clouds that the invisible is proved, but in the concrete. The CIA's analysis of time travel via consciousness is not, at its root, an esoteric experiment, it is a human one. Its power lies not in dramatic phenomena, but in subtle shifts, barely perceptible but tectonic over time. To manipulate reality is not to rupture it, but to refine it, breath by breath, moment by moment. Consider waking each morning not as a return to routine but as an entrance into a frequency. What if each hour you spend awake is not linear passage but a field into which your awareness is injected, charged, and amplified? This is not abstract theory. The document's core premise, drawn from the gateway experience and various mind synchronization techniques, is that intention, when sustained and coherent, reshapes perception. And since perception defines experience, the reshaping of reality is not distant science fiction. It is the exact shape of your next decision. Practical integration, then, begins with the reclaiming of attention. We have been taught that attention is passive, eyes seeing, ears hearing, mind interpreting. But the implications of this document insist the opposite: attention is active. It is creative. What you hold in the spotlight of your awareness does not merely sit there, it grows. It conforms. It materializes. So imagine the impact of cultivating a morning ritual, not for productivity, but for frequency. A deliberate synchronization with your own intentions, aligned before the world has a chance to pull you into its reactive rhythms. Even 10 minutes of focused silence, of breath slowed until thought begins to thin, becomes a tuning fork for the day's reality. In those 10 minutes, you are a sculptor carving a path not yet walked. The world you enter after such a moment is no longer neutral. It responds to your state, echoes your signal. From this inner ritual, all else flows. The difficult conversation you've been avoiding? Enter it not from anxiety but from alignment. Coherence makes the voice steady, makes the nervous system an ally instead of an adversary. The job you feel trapped in? Begin by mapping how much of it is perception. How much dread arises from narrative loops you've let repeat without intervention? What stories do you tell about your limits? Are they yours, or did you inherit them, unaware? This is where manipulation of reality ceases to be a high-concept thrill and becomes a spiritual discipline. It requires more than knowledge. It asks for precision. It demands that you treat your emotional responses not as reflections of the world, but as instruments by which you shape it. Emotion, in this sense, is not a reaction, it is a generator. Just as lasers rely on coherent light, powerful intention relies on emotionally charged clarity. You must feel your chosen reality before you can inhabit it. The implications deepen in the realm of choice. We are conditioned to believe that choice is constrained by external circumstances. But if you accept the document's hypothesis, that time is not fixed, but fractal, that reality is a field, not a chain, then each choice is not a response to the world but a bifurcation point in it. What appears to be a minor decision, whether to call someone, to speak a truth, to move or stay, may in fact be a gate into another track of time. one where events unfold not as predetermined, but as resonant with the self who chose. And what of community? If consciousness is contagious, if states of coherence can ripple through the field, then gatherings of aligned minds are no longer casual. They are circuits. They become amplifiers of shared frequency. This explains the energy felt in collective meditation, in music festivals, in focused activism. These are not social events. They are temporal laboratories. Together, people are not just dreaming, they are drafting. This leads us to a quiet but profound shift in how we understand power. No longer is power merely about control over resources or people. Power, in this framework, is the ability to stabilize a frequency within yourself long enough to influence the pattern field of reality. The most powerful among us may not look the part. They may be artists, teachers, wanderers. But when their inner world stabilizes, outer conditions begin to bend. This is not magic. It is alignment. The forbidden nature of the document becomes clearer here, not because it holds forbidden information, but because it empowers forbidden behavior, autonomy. The integration of this knowledge into daily life leads, inevitably, to the crumbling of manipulation systems that depend on you being out of sync with yourself. A person who is in phase, who knows their mind is more than a reactive echo, is a person who cannot be easily ruled. The manipulation of reality becomes, then, not only a personal liberation but a collective subversion. But let us not forget the patience it requires. This is not instant transformation. The world does not rearrange itself because you meditate once. The field responds to consistency. Just as a garden takes time to bear fruit, so too does your inner alignment. The practice is not glamorous. It is tedious, often. It involves days when coherence falters, when frequency slips. But every return to intention, every time you sit and tune again, is an act of sovereignty. And what of suffering? Can this philosophy address the sharp edges of real pain? It does not deny them. But it invites us to lean into them with a different posture. Pain, in this framework, becomes a signal of dissonance, a misalignment between the self and its context. Instead of resisting pain, we ask, what is this showing me about my current frequency? What part of me has accepted a reality that no longer resonates? Even grief, even loss, even trauma, these are not contradictions of the model, but invitations to transcend its surface. Because in every collapse is a portal. And the coherent mind does not escape suffering, it moves through it with awareness. And through that movement, the past is rewritten. Not erased. Transformed. So we end this section not with advice, but with a truth that echoes the entire document's meaning: reality is plastic. Not fragile, but pliable. It is listening. And the shape it takes is often no more, no less, than the echo of the state you hold within.